Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Sunday, August 9th, 2026, and you're listening to Alex's News. It is going to be an exceptionally hot day in Riverside, with a high temperature reaching 101.6 degrees, though it should cool down to a low of 72.1 degrees once the sun sets. Please take the necessary precautions and stay hydrated if you are planning to spend any time outside today. Later in the episode, we will dive into why Meta has been ordered to pay millions in penalties within New Mexico. We will also break down the factors surrounding the Senate's recent failure to pass the Save America Act. Beyond those major reports, we have several other significant stories to discuss as well. All this and much more coming up on Alex's News. Stay tuned. Good morning. We've been following Meta's legal troubles in New Mexico, where a court says the company harmed young people on its platforms. Ethan, what's the latest?
Well, Grace, as we reported last Friday, this case has been building for a while. But there's a major new development. Judge Brian Beedscheid of the First Judicial Court in Santa Fe has now ordered Meta to pay $567 million. That money is meant to address harms inflicted on young people through Facebook and Instagram. This is the second phase of a battle that started back in 2023.
$567 million. How did the judge frame that penalty?
He called it an abatement judgment, which is a legal remedy for what's known as a public nuisance. And here's the striking part. Judge Beedscheid likened Meta's conduct to that of a factory. He compared the resulting child sexual exploitation and mental health harms to pollution. So in his view, Meta was essentially polluting the community, and now it has to help clean up the mess.
That's a powerful comparison. Where's all that money actually going?
The bulk of it, $420 million, is specifically designated for treatment services for young people. The remaining funds will be used over the next 5 years. That covers screening services, awareness, prevention, and associated costs. So this isn't a check that just disappears into a state budget. The judge earmarked it very deliberately for helping the kids who were affected.
And I understand this isn't the only money Meta owes here.
That's right, and this is important context. Back in March, a jury ordered $375 million in civil penalties. That jury found Meta violated state consumer protection laws, knowingly harmed children's mental health, and concealed what it knew about child sexual exploitation on its platforms. So when you add it all up, Meta is now responsible for $942 million in New Mexico. That's a genuinely enormous number.
Nearly $1 billion. Does that actually hurt a company Meta's size?
You'd think so, but here's the reality check. Reports from the Associated Press and the Gleaner note this is a small fraction of Meta's 2025 annual profit, which was roughly $60 billion. And the market barely blinked. Meta's stock dipped less than 0.5% to $589.44 in after-hours trading. So financially, this is a rounding error for them, which is why the other parts of the ruling may matter more.
Let's get into that. What is Meta actually required to change?
This is where it gets interesting, Grace. The judge outlined some rigorous steps to protect minors in New Mexico. Meta must eliminate push notifications for users under 18 overnight and during school hours. And the company is now prohibited from letting New Mexico minors have romantic or sexualized interactions with its artificial intelligence chatbots. That AI piece is fairly cutting edge, and it reflects how quickly these platforms are evolving.
The chatbot restriction really stands out. What about keeping kids informed?
The court ordered Meta to display banner and informational screens for minors, at least once a week. Those screens provide resources and explain protection features, best practices, and tools for handling inappropriate comments. There's also an educational campaign that goes along with these changes. And notably, that campaign will be subject to state review, so New Mexico gets a say in how Meta communicates all this to young users.
Now, verifying someone's age online is notoriously tricky. How does the ruling handle that?
It's a real challenge, and the judge acknowledged it directly. There's a federal law, the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, or COPPA, that prevents passively tracking or collecting personal data from children under 13 for verification. So the court had to work within those limits. Still, it ordered Meta to improve its age assurance tools, including using AI to estimate age based on friend signals and content consumption. Basically, the system tries to guess how old you are from how you use the app.
So what specifically does Meta have to build?
Several things. Meta must attempt to develop a dedicated under 13 years of age prediction model within 2 years. It has to request proof of age from New Mexico users estimated to be under 13. And here's a key default. Meta must treat users as under 13 or under 18 if it can't pin down an age until that age is verified. The company also has to delete all personal information collected from users under 13.
That's a significant shift in how they'd operate. Is anyone else brought into that process?
Yes, and I think this part is clever. Meta is required to partner with schools or child safety organizations to create a reporting portal. That portal lets staff flag users they suspect are under 13. So teachers and counselors, people who actually know these kids, get a direct line to report accounts. And Meta must report its progress on all these abatement measures to the court twice a year, so there's ongoing oversight.
Did the judge give Meta any wins here at all?
One notable one. The judge declined to order changes to Meta's recommendation algorithms. His reasoning was that such a mandate would affect content across the entire platform, not just for minors. So the core engine that decides what you see stays untouched. That's actually a meaningful limit, because many critics argue those very algorithms are what drive the harm in the first place.
This feels like part of a much bigger wave against social media, is it?
Absolutely, and that's the broader story. The Los Angeles Times noted a Los Angeles jury recently found both Meta-owned Instagram and Google-owned YouTube negligent. They were faulted for designing addictive features that harmed a California woman's mental health. On top of that, families of 4 teenagers who died by suicide recently sued Meta, Snap, TikTok, and YouTube. They cited what they called years of escalating harms.
And Meta has more courtroom battles coming up soon?
It does. Later this month, Meta faces a federal trial in Oakland, California. That involves the first 4 of 29 states that filed a multi-district lawsuit in 2023. They allege Meta designed addictive features that fueled a youth mental health crisis. And there are other state trials going right now, including one in Tennessee. So New Mexico is really just one front in a sprawling legal war.
Let's hear from the people involved. What is New Mexico's Attorney General saying?
Attorney General Raul Torres, who filed this suit back in 2023, called the ruling a victory for parents and children. He said Meta's platforms have served as, quote, breeding ground for predators, end quote. He also accused the company of being dishonest with parents and policymakers. And Torres says he'll press the court to make sure Meta implements the safety measures immediately and pays the penalties as soon as possible.
And how is Meta responding?
Meta has vowed to appeal, and it disagrees with the court's findings. A spokesperson said the company remains confident in its record of protecting teenagers and works hard to keep users safe. They also argued Meta has been transparent about how difficult it is to identify bad actors and remove harmful content. So expect this fight to continue well beyond today.
Big picture, what do the experts think this all means?
There's a telling quote from Laura Edelson, an assistant professor at Northeastern University. She told the Associated Press this outcome is the, quote, first of many dominoes, end quote, to fall. Her point is that states are now finding a viable legal path to hold these companies accountable for harms caused by product design. If she's right, New Mexico could be the template that other states follow. And that's a much bigger threat to Meta than any single fine.
Fascinating stuff, and clearly a story we'll keep watching. Ethan, thanks for breaking it all down for us.
My pleasure, Grace. I'll be following those upcoming trials closely.
Welcome back. Our next story takes us to Capitol Hill, where a marathon Senate session ended in a standoff. Senators left town without giving President Trump the voting bill he'd been demanding. Here to walk us through it is our reporter, Chloe. Chloe, good morning. What exactly happened overnight?
Good morning, Grace. So in the pre-dawn hours of Saturday, August 8th, just yesterday, U.S. senators finally ended a long legislative standoff and headed home for summer recess. According to the Associated Press, reporting via the Orlando Sentinel and also Ground News, the whole thing capped off a session that ran nearly 20 hours. And the big headline is what they didn't do. They left Washington without passing the Save America Act, which is the strict proof of citizenship voting bill that President Trump had been pushing hard.
So this was the president's top ask, and it just didn't happen?
Right. The reporting describes a real clash between the president's executive demands and the Senate's own procedural rules. President Trump had spent weeks, and I'm quoting the coverage here, quote, poking and prodding, end quote, Senate Majority Leader John Thune of South Dakota to advance the bill. The Save America Act would have required a narrow set of photo IDs to establish voter eligibility for federal elections. But it just didn't have the votes, so it stalled.
Let's talk about those votes. Why couldn't Republicans get it across the line?
It really comes down to the math and the rules, Grace. The bill lacked enough support even within the slim Republican majority, and it faced total opposition from Democrats. That meant it couldn't meet the traditional 60-vote threshold that's required to advance most legislation in the Senate. So even though Republicans hold the majority, they were nowhere near 60 votes on this one. Without Democratic support, and with some Republicans hesitant, it simply couldn't move forward under the normal process.
And I understand the president had an idea to get around that threshold?
He did. To overcome that 60-vote wall, President Trump insisted the Senate abandon its filibuster rules to just jam the act through. Now, that's a huge deal, because the filibuster is one of the Senate's most protected traditions. In an interview with Punchbowl News, Trump actually acknowledged Thune's efforts. He said, quote, John's trying, but if he doesn't get there, it would be unfortunate, end quote. So he was applying pressure while giving Thune a little bit of credit.
How did Thune and the other senators respond to that push?
They weren't willing to go there. Most senators, including Thune himself, did not want to abolish the legislative filibuster. And this is the tension that's been building for a while now. You've got the president's legislative ambitions on one side, and on the other you've got the constraints of Senate rules and those really slim margins. A lot of Republicans see the filibuster as protection for when they're in the minority, so blowing it up for one bill was a bridge too far for them.
So how did this all come to a head overnight?
It got tense. A growing group of senators, led by Senator Mike Lee of Utah, actually refused to adjourn for the summer break until the voting bill passed. So they essentially dug in and said, we're not leaving. That forced a lot of behind-the-scenes maneuvering. There was a 2-hour conference meeting among Republicans, and then a late-night phone call with the president himself. And out of all that, they finally reached a compromise.
What did that compromise actually look like?
So Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, who chairs the GOP Budget Committee, stepped up to announce it. He was flanked by Senators Lee and Rick Scott of Florida. And instead of forcing an immediate standalone vote, the plan is now to attempt to attach specific elements of the voting bill to a broader GOP budget package. That package is scheduled for September, so about a month from now. Johnson said the president signed off on this. He stated, quote, with the president at his direction, this is what he wants to do, end quote.
A budget package in September. What else is riding on that bill?
It's a big one, Grace. This larger package is intended to replenish the Pentagon and to fund what the reporting calls the, quote, Iran war, end quote. So the voting provisions would essentially be riding along with major defense and military spending. That's a common strategy in Washington, attaching something that can't pass on its own to a must-pass bill. But it's not guaranteed to work, and we'll have to see whether those voting elements survive the process in September.
And how did Senator Lee feel about settling for that instead of an immediate vote?
He wasn't thrilled, honestly. Even with the agreement in place, Senator Lee acknowledged the reality of the situation. He noted that the Senate simply did not have the, quote, wherewithal, end quote, to pass the act before the recess. So this was really a recognition that the votes weren't there right now, and the September route was the best path they could find. It's a delay and a workaround more than a victory for the folks who wanted it passed immediately.
Now, they were there for almost 20 hours. Did they get anything else done?
They actually did accomplish quite a bit, according to the Associated Press and Ground News. On confirmations, the Senate confirmed Todd Blanche as Attorney General. On foreign policy, they passed a Russian sanctions package meant to aid Ukraine. And on the fiscal side, they approved a bipartisan package to fund the government through December, which avoids a shutdown. So even with all the drama over the voting bill, several major priorities did get across the finish line during that long night.
You mentioned a slimmer voting bill earlier. What happened with that one?
Right, so there was a second, quote, slimmer, end quote, version they tried too. That one focused specifically on requiring IDs for federal elections, so it was a scaled-back approach. But it also failed to advance, and again, the reason was Democratic opposition. So both the broader Save America Act and this narrower alternative hit the same wall. Democrats were united against both, and without their votes, neither could reach that 60-vote threshold we talked about.
And I understand the Republican majority was actually down a member during all this.
That's right, and it made those slim margins even tighter. Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky was absent for the proceedings. He was recovering at home after being released from a rehabilitation center. So when you're already working with a narrow majority and you lose a vote to a health absence, every single senator matters that much more. That absence really strained things during an already difficult stretch of votes.
So how did it all finally wrap up as the sun came up?
It ended near daybreak, which is fitting after a nearly 20-hour marathon. The motion to adjourn was adopted through a simple voice vote. And I should note, that wasn't unanimous by any stretch. There were, quote, hearty noes, end quote, from Senator Lee and his allies, the same group that had wanted to stay and fight for the bill. But a voice vote carried the day, and senators packed up and left for recess.
So the bottom line is, the president didn't get what he wanted before they left?
That's exactly how it's being framed. The Toledo Blade, highlighted that senators ultimately exited the Capitol without meeting the president's original demands. So while there's this promise to revisit the voting provisions in September, the immediate reality is a setback for the White House. Trump wanted the Save America Act passed now, potentially by blowing up the filibuster. And instead, the Senate held to its rules and went home. The September budget fight will be the next real test.
Chloe, thank you so much for breaking all of that down for us this morning.
Happy to, Grace. We'll be watching closely to see what happens when the Senate returns in September.
Here are some other headlines. Starting with a spark in Canada, British Columbia is feeling the heat after declaring a state of emergency this past Saturday. The Bald Range wildfire has really grown on the region, exploding to approximately 9,500 hectares. Premier David Eby says a fire official likened the blaze to a bomb going off, as the fire essentially became a weather maker. Over 20,000 people have been forced to pack their bags in the largest evacuation of the summer, with residents in Summerland finding themselves in hot water, literally as untreated water entered the system, leading to boil water notices and power outages. Across the province, 1,500 firefighters are battling more than 100 fires. It has been a scorched earth year for Canada, with 4 million hectares burned so far. Turning to the digital world, MySpace is trying to make a comeback with a planned relaunch, though the social media landscape remains a legal minefield. A jury recently found that Meta and YouTube were negligent in a social media addiction trial, adding to a growing wave of legal backlash against big tech. In global diplomacy, things are getting tense in the Middle East. Tehran is digging in its heels, insisting on concessions from the United States before it will open the Strait of Hormuz, even as it nears a deal with Oman. It seems the two nations are still struggling to find a smooth current for negotiations. Moving to the economy, the job market is giving us some mixed signals. U.S. employers unexpectedly cut 23,000 jobs last month, and the Labor Department slashed payroll numbers for May and June by 103,000. While the unemployment rate dipped to 4.1%, it is more of a disappearing act than a victory, as it is attributed to Americans simply leaving the workforce. Meanwhile, homebuyers are feeling the squeeze, as mortgage rates have climbed for 5 consecutive weeks. The benchmark 30-year fixed rate has hit 6.69%, the highest in over a year. However, Wall Street saw the silver lining, with stocks rising and Treasury yields falling on hopes that the Federal Reserve might put the brakes on further rate hikes. Finally, ICE is fast-tracking its transparency. The agency now expects every field officer and agent to be equipped with a body camera by the end of August, moving the deadline up from late September. Acting Director David Centurella is defending the agency's tight grip on the footage, claiming that restrictions are necessary to protect privacy and investigations. He pushed back against reports regarding the release of footage following deaths in custody, arguing that the agency is simply acting in the best interests of the investigation. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Opus 4.8, Gemini Pro 3.1, Gemini Flash 3, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.